Good evening, all. Hi, Tanya Bansal. On behalf of Team Corporate Law Advisor and CII, welcome you all to our today's session of live channel on ADR. In today's session, our experts will conduct a panel discussion on the topic laws on online gaming and sports. For the discussion, we have with us Vishwam Jindal sir, Pragni Kapadia ma'am, and Parikshit Madhishetty sir. Vishwam sir is a dual qualified lawyer, having a vast experience in online dispute resolution, mediation, international arbitration, and other modes of alternate dispute resolution. Pragni ma'am is a law graduate from London School of Economics and also holds a master's degree in law from University of Pennsylvania School of Law and is presently working as senior advisor with PDS Legal. She has an experience of over 15 years in IPR law, in technology law, data privacy law, and also has a vast experience in foreign direct investment along with regulatory work in various industries like media entertainment, pharmaceutical, to name a few. Parikshit sir is the managing director of Grid Logic Group. He has been associated with various successful ventures and has also advised many startup companies as an investor, board member, and also a mentor. He has played a significant role in getting B2B space active for Rummy in India with TJN, that is Large Network. In addition to it, he has been the chairman of Gaming Committee of Internet and Mobile Association of India from 2017 to 2021 and has brought fundamental additions to take the industry ahead. Before we begin with the session, I would like to request all participants to please be on mute. During the session, if any participant has any query, feel free to post it in the chat box and they will be duly answered. With these words, I now hand over the dice to Vishwam sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaitanya. Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is staying safe and well. Welcome to the October edition of the CII CLA webinar series. We've got a slightly different format this time, so we don't have the update section, which we generally have every month. And that's predominantly because there weren't too many arbitration, mediation, important updates to cover. So we directly skipped to the panel discussion this time. Panel discussion this time is the laws which govern online gaming and esports. And we've got two very eminent and experienced panelists today. Chetan has just introduced them. So I guess without any further ado, I will just jump onto the panel discussion. The same house rules apply, which have applied to previous webinars. So if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, if you want to share your experiences, please feel free to unmute yourself and directly ask your question or share your experience. There's also the chat box, which you can mention your question or comment in. So we will be monitoring the chat box as well. So firstly, thank you so much, Pragni and Parikshit, for joining. Coming on to online games and esports. Now, I guess before we get on to the legalities and the sort of the commercial aspects of the industry, I just wanted to set the stage in terms of, what are the different forms of online games, esports, etc. I mean, personally, I've come across, loads of different forms of online games. Some are very controversial, if that's the right word to use. Some are more naive and innocent. There are obviously games which children would play. There are games which adults would play. So if I may pick on you, Pariksha, to just, break down for us on what are the different types of online games, how do you classify them in the industry in terms of, various formats, etc.
Thanks, Vishwam. Thanks for having me first. And I'll say the industry has only two formats. That's basically game of skill and game of chance. And wherever there is no regulation or there's no jurisdiction actually assigned, everybody terms their games as game of skill, and that's what is happening in India. So when I started off in this industry, Rummy was considered to be game of skill and it can be played with stakes. With a Supreme Court judgment which came back like long time ago when we were not even born. Then came the judgment on poker and then fantasy, and then various other formats started emerging. And the basis of the formats, as you know, there is no license in India and everything is considered as a game of skill. You get an opinion from a law firm which is reputed on the game format that you are actually wanting to operate on, and you get a payment gateway and you can start your business. Now, some formats which you actually call controversial are actually done in the format of contests. So That's actually shows that the game winning outcome of the winning is actually more towards the person who's actually showing more skill. So if skill is actually more, then it is called as games of skill. It's very interesting to actually put it in a simpler format. KitKat went to court and said, "We are not a chocolate and we are a wafer." And they actually came up with a judgment stating that it's 70% wafer and 30% chocolate. So we are similar to that. And they went to court because they wanted lesser taxation. And I would say the game of skill, game of chance is like that. And Rummy is considered to be game of skill at the end of the day. And we are all operating and riding on that judgment.
Thank you, Parikshit. Is there like any categorization within, say, game of skill, within game of chance? Or would you say, fantasy sports somehow different from arcade sports versus just social gaming? Or do you think these are all artificial distinctions which are pretty irrelevant?
So, as an industry, various people actually put these games under various buckets for their own commercial benefits. But it's my personal view that we are all riding on the same judgment of game of skill. If you actually refer to any judgment which, say, fantasy sports came in just now or just few years ago, but I've been in this industry for almost like 10 years now. So on the first year of my business, if I asked what am I relying on, I was relying on that game of skill judgment, which was on Rummy and which was from Supreme Court and so whatnot. So if you see today, as there is no licensed jurisdiction apart from Nagaland, Sikkim, and now hear that Diu and Daman and other states are also opening up jurisdiction. Apart from those, everybody else is riding on game of skill, though there are different sectors. One actually does multiplayer, one actually does in the contest mode, and one does it in a different way.
Thank you. That's quite helpful. Just taking a step further, I guess, you mentioned about a few Supreme Court judgments. I'm going to come to you, Pragni. What's like the lay of the land in terms of law? Like there are obviously different decisions, some by the Supreme Court, some by the high courts, and then there are various state legislations as well. Can you walk us through like just the main ones that you think are absolutely relevant?
So as you know, technology always outpaces regulation, right? In all spheres, which is similar for gaming. And we have gaming laws which are dated from the British Raj, which goes back to the public morality of that time, without taking into account how the industry has grown, how the people have changed, and there's a stigma associated with gaming, which is very historical. Now, states have taken those views, and like Parikshit said, some states have legalized online gaming, they have licensing, they have more sophisticated laws of having servers in the states. Meghalaya even allows virtual currency, as speaks of that. This new Karnataka amendment talks about tokens for online gaming. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with respect to payments and even NFTs. So there's a lot happening, and the laws haven't kept up with the technology. So as Parikshit mentioned, the test is of predominance of skill, which is the skill has to be higher. And the Supreme Court has held that it has to be a higher element of skill in a game. And skill is defined as something which you have, take some initiative to do. And it's not just based on chance, like your bingo and all that. So you have to use your brain, you have to use some motor movements, you have to that's what happens with games of skill, and that's the test of the Supreme Court, which is followed. Now what's been happening lately is there's been a spurt in online gaming because of COVID-19 and better, especially in India now, cellular networks are all over. People have smartphones. Everybody's gaming because they didn't have anything to do for this whole year, right? With the lockdowns. And so there's been concern because people have been losing money. There's public policy concerns. And so states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, all, have been banning online gaming. Now, Karnataka is the latest one to follow suit, even though Tamil Nadu, the High Court held that it was totally, disproportionate and an overtly paternalistic approach, and that law has been totally struck down. Kerala, the High Court has just held that, again with Rummy, where online Rummy for stakes was banned and physical rummy for stakes was allowed, which really had no logic. And Kerala has also now banned that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, especially there are other states also like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana and all, which have some ban on online gaming for stakes, but those haven't been challenged yet. So it's all right now really up in the air. And I think this is the time that the courts are pushing back, because if you see what happened in Kerala, if you see what happened in Tamil Nadu, and the Tamil Nadu judgment is really very detailed if anybody has read it, and it's really if companies strike while the iron is hot and use this to their advantage in terms of setting up self-regulatory organizations, showing that gaming companies are responsible, and the positives also for gaming, like it helps children in learning, or it helps in health, like if they're aged people with memory failing, what do doctors say? Play a game, play bridge, or I mean, and all these things are like online, right? So there's a lot the industry can do to change that. So in terms
we
of
definitely come to that. Sorry, just in terms of like the test between game of chance versus game of skill. So what's the current legal test that courts would apply or that state legislations would apply?
it's the Lakshmanan test, which is the mere skill. So the skill has to be higher, like he said, 70% chocolate wafer and 30% chocolate. So 70% skill, 30% chance. But the courts, so see, right now it's a subjective test, right? So at every step of the way, you have to keep going to the courts or the courts may say, or someone files a PIL, or these things keep happening, and that's the challenge gaming companies deal with. So I think, which was one of the things you wanted to discuss as well, is uniformity, right? We have to have some sort of objective standards for game of skill and game of chance, instead of just saying that it's a subjective test. It has to be some objective standards put down where then gaming companies have certainty, right? And like Parikshit said, Rummy's been going on for years. Fantasy gaming is new. So that had different things. So you can have different then approaches, or the industry can take a call, or I mean, we can discuss that a little later when we discuss the self-regulatory bodies and all those issues. But basically, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned that obviously different states have different laws, and that's because this comes under the state list. So the state governments have
That's
jurisdiction to pass laws on gaming. Now, we've recently had instances where chief ministers of state governments have written to the central government they should regulate gaming. And I think the MITI published a letter saying that they're considering a uniform approach across India for online gaming, whether it's game of skill, game of chance, etc. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think there should be a uniform approach that the central government should intervene? Or do you think what we have in terms of every state government coming out with laws is a better thing?
No, definitely there should be a uniform approach, because right now gaming companies, go through hell every time a new amendment is passed. It's not conducive for anyone. They have to have geotagging. They have different, they have each state has different things. Now, for example, what happened in Karnataka with the FIRs filed against the Dream 11 as soon as this amendment came out, then they, the Fantasy Gaming Association has taken an opinion from a judge, put it on their website. Like, it's a lot of, and that's the Supreme Court has ruled that fantasy gaming is a game of skill. They have said there's no debating that, and still at the state level, you have these discrepancies. So the industry is not going to grow, and you're not going to attract more investment. I mean, there's so much revenue, and it's all not disadvantageous, right? There are so many positives to gaming. Like today, you have professional gaming, and the income generated by the gamers may be more than me as a lawyer, right? So then, I mean, it's a form of revenue. It's in many ways like income, employment, taxes. Now, if you see, they allow tobacco, they allow alcohol. It's the same, no addiction. It's the same loss of money. It's the same putting money down the tubes if you say that alcoholics drink. It's the same as gamblers, right? Tobacco causes deaths. It's a step worse. Even alcohol does. And
I'll come to that.
I mean, then so gaming should have a uniform legislation, or at least standards which are followed by states, some directions or self-regulatory bodies being in charge of making sure that, I mean, there has to be some uniformity, whatever mechanism that should come. So to go back to your question on the Métis, but there was also another judgment, and there were articles on that, but not a judgment, an affidavit submitted in again by the Métis saying that they cannot. I've not seen the submissions to the court because they're not public knowledge, but this is relying on press articles where they've said that they can't rule, it's a state subject. So that was immediately after that letter which you're talking about. So even there's a disconnect.
Yeah. Just asking the same question to you, Parikshit, as a sort of player in the market, would you prefer that each state be left to make its own laws, whether it be on a uniform approach or not? Or would you prefer that the central government sort of intervenes in a constitutional way, and then has a central law on the subject?
See, as far as I know, state laws are actually on gambling and not on games of skill. So they have a freedom to do what they want when it actually is games of chance and when it is gambling. We don't come under that. We are games of skill. And Supreme Court has time and again actually said that it can be played with stakes. So whether the state government wants to take up this responsibility or central government wants to take up this responsibility, why not? The only thing I would actually request as a gaming entrepreneur is, do they have that infrastructure to take it up at the state level? Like Pregni said, liquor is one thing. They have an excise whole department, and there's a whole force which actually licenses, regulates, and just to see if everything is enforced properly. But if something happens on the state level in gaming, there's no infrastructure as of now. Now, if you look at UK or the US, they are actually following a different standard. Previously, US was in a different standard, and right now they're actually going state-wise. If you look at UK, it's like the whole country comes under the UKGC norms and everything. Either ways, it's fine. If you provide more clarity, then everybody will operate in a transparent environment. If you don't provide clarity, then all the under the blanket stories will start, which is not good for the nation, is what I actually feel.
Okay, thank you. No, that's quite helpful. And just coming back to you, Pragni, on this point, you mentioned that obviously the central government doesn't have, the locus because it is a state government subject. It is a state subject under the constitution. But would you prefer, say, like a model, like how the central government released the model tenancy law, which state governments could adapt? Do you see the central government adopting such approach when it comes to uniformity? Or do you think it's probably unlikely that they're going to do that because gaming is obviously not as big as the real estate sector?
gaming is actually going to be quite big. If you read the statistics and the reports, it's going to grow as one of the largest sectors globally now. And I genuinely don't know what they have in mind, but if that works, and then the states have some sort of a guideline which then they adopt, that would certainly be helpful, because right now it's one big palaver.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to move on to our next subject, and you briefly mentioned this, Pragni, on self-regulation. Now, in December 2020, of course, Niti Aayog published guiding principles for the uniform national regulation of online fantasy sports in India. This was obviously on the backdrop of several states passing their own laws, some of them being conflicting across different states. Can you tell us a little more about these guiding principles, Pragni?
So the Niti Aayog published a paper which was to do with setting up of self-regulate. They recognize that globally, even the US has provided a safe harbor for fantasy gaming, and so they came out with this whole paper to promote the area, seeing the growth, and because it's primarily cricket and we're a cricket-driven country, so they've taken the initiative with that. And so they have put certain guidelines and indicated that self-regulatory bodies should be set out. There should be mostly skill in games. The gaming company should have certain KYCs. If you're under 18, you shouldn't play with money, and fairness and transparency in terms of conditions, advertising norms, etc. So they're very strict on the advertising norms. Now, the advertising norms are also covered by ASCII, who has prohibited certain use of certain things, and also by your press codes of broadcasting, which also have certain stipulations. What's interesting is after this, there have been a spurt of self-regulatory organizations which have their charters. The fantasy gaming organization, Cricket One, is one of them, where they have their own code which follows this. There's also the AIGF charter, which is very detailed. It follows things like players can even choose to opt out of playing games if they want to for a certain time, and if they tick that, they won't be able to go back in. They prescribe certain standards for games, what we discussed. So if you fit under rummy, if you fit under poker, if you fit under their criteria, then you automatically are a game of skill. If there's a new format which doesn't, they also have a mechanism where you can apply for it to their committee, who will then tell you whether it is or not. So a situation like this,
Sorry,
where
the committee will tell you what?
Whether your format passes muster, whether you can go ahead with it. So if it's a format which is not predetermined by them, and there's a new game that comes up, there's a format for an application. So see, that makes the space for some growth in the industry, or a new format of a game, without having to go back to the law every time. And once it develops, I suppose they could add the standards, right? So it's an open area, and that's very helpful. So I feel like if the government works with the industry, and the industry through their self-regulatory organizations, and their whole some element of trust between the two, because right now it just seems like there's a whole element of distrust, right? So an interesting example is, a few years ago, Novo Nordisk is an insulin manufacturing company. So what do they benefit from? The sale of diabetes drugs, right? Like, if people buy more insulin, it's better for them. But they did a whole social service campaign across 6 cities globally, where they said, hey, change your lifestyle, decrease your dependence on our drugs, move, don't eat burgers. It was a whole media campaign, and CEO got the Harvard Business School CEO of the Year. He won basis that campaign, right? So there's a company saying that I can take responsibility to help you. And they conducted surveys and they worked with UCL and, European universities to do all this and put forth data and help people, right? Not just profit from the sale of their medicines. The gaming sector could also do something similar, which is show how it benefits, show that it's not only a stigma associated with gambling. There are many benefits. Today, AI can be used to the benefit of the gaming industry. Like I've been, to prevent cheating, to prevent people from going over. So if you go over that limit or whatever, your app can be cut down. There are many safeguards that can be put into place, and if the industry works together with the government to come up, but the government has to be open to allow that channel, and then it can happen, right? Right now, it's just what it is. The situation.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that's a good point. I mean, the Niti Aayog has definitely recommended using self-regulatory bodies in sector, and generally that the sector self-regulates. I want to come to you, Parikshit. Across sectors, and this is not specific to gaming, there has been generally the critics would say that if you're a self-regulatory body, and if there are multiple self-regulatory bodies across a sector, there is a criticism that 5 companies will come up with a self-regulatory body, draft a code of ethics that suits them, put people on the board which suits them, and then go and seek advice from them. So it's not really self-regulation, it's just 5 companies collectively coming together to make regulation in their own best interests. And of course, I'm not suggesting that happens in the gaming sector, but that's a criticism generally people have for self-regulation across sectors. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
So when I started off in the industry, there was no self-regulatory code as such, and nobody even was actually speaking about it. I think when I actually started, the industry was about 180 crores, and today, as we speak, it is about 21,000 crores, which is $3 billion. And if you look at the West, who actually is regulated today, have also migrated from no regulation to self-regulation to proper regulation. And that all happens with revenue, tax generation, and employment that we create. So if I look at it from my side of the story, at least some, if not one, we at least have 5 self-regulation codes. And you can go through, they all have a same format in the sense, I think they don't want to actually come under one umbrella and do it because various game formats have various other requirements. Like Rummy would have a separate requirement and poker would have a separate requirement. And fantasy would also have a separate requirement, and the target audiences are different. Even in gaming, fantasy has more audiences than Rummy, and that's the reason why we have more self-regulation codes. And also we've been actually following one charter for a long time. Like if you see, first Rummy came in and we spent couple like 3-4 years, and then poker came in, and then after 3 years fantasy came in, and now esports and many other things are coming up. We're already part of a charter, so we don't have to go and join all the parties in the town. So we are sticking to one, and obviously the newer charters which are actually coming are actually doing the same regulation in a better way, or drafting it in a way which everybody understands, but underlying statements are the same. This is what we follow, and this is not where we actually go overboard. So it's good to have that. And when we become a $200 billion industry, like in the UK or in the US, maybe everybody will come up with, government only will come up with a code that we want to follow.
Okay. So you're saying just because there are like different gaming formats, so you need different SROs, but at the end of the day, they're all similar.
See, we're all riding under game of skill. So if you ask me in a simpler term, you're driving a car or a bike, you have a uniform traffic code. That's everybody drives on the left, and you actually stop for the red light, and you actually drive when you green. So all the self-regulation codes also say the same thing. So maybe some other self-regulation codes will say that, hey, at the zebra crossing, you need to do this. And when you see an old man, you should actually slow down. They've written better formats, but end on end, you actually drive on the left side and basically you stop on a red light. That's our clear self-regulation code, which is there.
Okay, understood. Just moving on from within self-regulatory codes and generally, I guess, as part of self-regulation, I think grievance, redressal, and dispute resolution is quite a central theme, and it's obviously been in the news because the government is trying to encourage it. We've seen earlier with social media intermediaries and digital publishers, OTT platforms having to set up grievance redressal. Of course, there the government has actually prescribed rules in terms of having a 3-tier level mechanism. Uh, if you're familiar with the draft e-commerce rules as well, which are not rules now, but they were just draft published, the government wanted every e-commerce company to have a grievance redressal officer. That is, of course, part of regulation if the government passed the law. But just coming to self-regulation, I know most codes do have grievance redressal mechanisms, which every gaming company has to set up. Can you throw a little more light on how the industry is looking at grievance redressal within the self-regulatory mechanism?
So there are two sides of the story. Basically, there's two sides of the coin, I would say, and say that we are a platform. Players are actually coming and playing on our platform. We take a platform fee, and the game is organized. Why are they actually paying us? Is for organizing this tournament or a game in between two players. You and Pregni are actually playing, and we actually charge a platform fee. You win, and Pregni loses, and Pregni has an issue because she has actually lost. I, as a company, have to choose one side. Either I go on your side or I actually go on her side. I can't take on both sides. Now, what am I making is maybe about a 15% or 20%. And if I'm actually taking some player stand, then we have a proof at which we can actually show that this is our side of the story. This grievance mechanism, though you actually raise it, everybody is free to raise it. It's my view that it's one-sided. When somebody loses or somebody has some issue, they have their own side of the story and they don't understand the company side or the other player side at which we are. And obviously, companies are blamed towards it. Having said that, are we actually doing it at a level which is accepted? I think yes. Because if you go see any company, you buy a laptop, you see Dell, HP, Acer, Lenovo, you just Google, they'll have a sales of $2 billion and also have like 200 million complaints that they will have. So there's a certain level of revenue is to grievances that is there, and every company wants to actually solve them, and that's what actually derives our NPS score and our brand and our credibility and everything. So we definitely are trying to do our best, and sometimes if we are missing on something, there are charters, and people will definitely try to get a way out, and they will find their own solution if we are not able to provide it. That's
Thank you.
my view.
No, that's very helpful. Just coming back to you, Pragni. Now, I guess consumer protection is obviously quite important and part of grievance redressal. You mentioned about building trust. At least my view of the world is that if you build trust with your consumers, can you build trust with the government? So if it doesn't matter what your revenues are, if you don't have a sophisticated mechanism of resolving grievances or complaints or disputes and your consumers are happy, you cannot keep the government happy at the end of the day. So I wanted to sort of get your view on firstly how the legalities of grievance redressal work in the gaming sector, and where do these self-regulatory bodies come in? Do they have any role play in grievance redressal, or they're completely on an advisory in a different side altogether?
So the AIGF has guidelines where they say that you have to respond within 72 hours, and the companies have to have systems in place. What the companies are actually doing, I think Parikshit would be in a better position to answer in terms of that. But it's a lot of work. So even setting up these systems at the back end, educating the team, making sure that the right answers go out, the right things are flagged if there's an issue. So all those things from a legal perspective need to be looked at, and you have to have training and SOPs in place. Also sometimes technology, if you have the right back end technology, this can be improved, and it can be less tiresome for the gaming companies. But there so the way it works, like in the intermediary rules, is they have a three-tier grievance redressal system, where it first goes to the company, then it goes to the self-regulatory organization, and then it goes to the government. So
Is
I
the first
don't
two
think,
levels the same in gaming? Like, do you, if
I
I,
mean, I don't know if that exists. I don't think they have that yet, but it would be
you know,
helpful for people to come together, and in some way, and work out something, so that the government also feels the consumers are protected, and like you said, the consumers have faith. Because so I mean, um, as of now, what I understand is that the AIGF mandates that the companies set up their own grievance redressal system.
do you know, Parikshit, so what happens if I file a grievance as a consumer with a company and it's not resolved? Can I go to your self-regulatory body in appeal, or I can't? Or I just have to
You
go to
should
court then?
you should be able to, and every game and every company has a different SRO. Like fantasy sports is actually monitored by FIFS. Similarly, most of the poker companies are coming under AIGF. Again, there is Internet and Mobile Association of India, which has all the game committees separately. So you should be able to actually find a way out. Ideally, I don't think an SRO would be needed at this scenario, because it's only 80 million people that are actually playing in one of the brands. And if you see how many people actually log in and play daily, would be about 10% of that or 50% of that. And how many people would actually have grievances, with a very small percentage. So all the companies do try to resolve their queries in about 24 hours. And there's no pressing need for any player to actually go talk to the government for the investments that they have been doing. That's my personal view.
Okay. But how if, just assume for like the next 2 minutes that I tell you that, the system is broken and you need to build more trust with your users, with your consumers, and it doesn't matter what your revenues are or what population of India uses gaming. How do you propose that the sector does that? Build confidence with its users.
See, trust itself is actually not built on like days, years. It takes decades. If I have to take a generic example, Air India was taken by government from Tata's for whatever reasons at that point of time, and it took so much time for them to actually show that they're working for the nation and there's no ultimate beneficiary owner, and it's the Tata Trust which get benefited, and that's how they've been running all their companies as of today, and it came back to them. It takes the same amount of time for our industry as well. And if something is broken, there are ways to actually fix it. And if it was so broken, Niti Aayog would not actually publish the kind of paper that they are actually publishing for fantasy sports. Similarly, Tamil Nadu and Kerala courts would not actually strike off the request of the government. So something is right that is actually here. And if you see any industry, like even if you take OTT, they would also have some or the other grievance mechanisms. But how many people actually do that? Like out of the 100 people which are actually watching today, maybe about 1 or 2% do that. And companies have the ability to solve all of that, whatever it takes. If it is in our purview, why would we actually not do it? If you're asking me that, hey, I've invested 1 rupee and I have to win 1 crore, it's not possible. What actually is possible is I take a platform fee and give you the right technology to operate it. Now it's on your skill on what is the outcome, and we'll definitely try to stick to our terms and conditions. That's what our companies are saying, and we do have all the stringent mechanisms in place. Maybe they are not monitored by governments, but we are happy to open them, is my view from my company point of view.
Okay. Do you think it'll improve transparency and the accountability if companies were to publish statistics on how many complaints they get in a month, say, or in a quarter?
See, if
It happens in a lot of other sectors where they have to publish, reports, monthly compliance in terms of grievance redressal. Do you think that would help if that was to be done in the gaming sector as well?
So the thing is, right, I am neither positive about this whole thing and neither negative. I can only give you an example that this pesticides industry, previously farmers were actually drinking pesticides and dying. So uh, banning pesticides is not the solution, right? Basically, it benefits. So how many farmers had an issue and they had grievances? Obviously, that's a well organized sector. There's chit funds. Chit funds is very well organized in South India. How many people have grievances? They are actually going to the office of government office where they're all regulated and they're going. Government itself is not publishing anything of that sort. So you expect a private body, which is in basically a self-regulatory organization to do that. I don't know if they would actually do that because it's not their business. But
Well,
I'm
I,
open.
I can tell you a lot of regulators do. If you look at insurance, the IRDAI, RBI for banking, the PFRDA for pension, all statistics are published. Even within the media sector, ASCII publishes its reports. Pragni mentioned it. There are other self-regulatory bodies. I mean, of course, I'm not suggesting that, uh, it be banned or there's anything wrong about game of skill. I'm just thinking, there is this sector, it's self-regulated. If you want to avoid government regulation, how do you make it better?
See, it's my personal view. We don't want to avoid government regulation. We want regulation. I actually personally want black and white. Yes, operate, don't operate. That's my personal view. We want our players to be safe. We want our employees to be safe. We want our company to be safe. That's the very first point. Second point, you take any regulated industry, let's say mutual funds. Mutual funds, sahi hai, is ads are actually going. There's a certain percentage of revenue which is shared with these organizations which are actually running. Now, whether our companies are actually able to fund that organization or not, if we are able to fund that organization, whether that organization is capable enough to do all of this has to be done. I don't think in an industry which is $3 billion and which is dominated by 5 or 10 players is capable enough to do it commercially. Because if I were to go to a Sachin Tendulkar or a Rahul Dravid and say, hey, why don't you help our industry? This is what we want you to do. You tell us playing online gaming is safe. Like these are the standards that we are following. They would never come and say, hey, I'll do it for free. They will actually say, this is my price. And are we capable enough to pay that price as an organization? I really doubt. So I think it is all linked to spending some more time in the industry, getting mature, getting legal clarity from both courts and governments. And similarly, players are also comfortable playing in your environment. And hence the employment will grow, revenue will grow. And similarly, all of these things will come into picture. Even if you implement today, how many companies can actually comply to that also has to be seen. If you're looking at like top 5 companies complying to that and rest of the 95 not doing it, it's not right as per me. All the 95 also have to be doing that same thing. So
Yeah.
the intent is there for the industry. It has to be put in a right format.
Understood. So I guess the takeaway from that is that you're obviously pro regulation, but it's probably too early for the sector. So wait for a few more months, years, and then it's probably best if the government actually sets up a regulatory body instead of the self-regulatory mechanism. That would be your personal take.
Yeah, I would say we are already legal. We just want more clarity. If you give me a paper that, okay, online rummy is basically legal and here is the paper. Like if you go to any country like Macau, there is a way. There are casinos and obviously you know how big it is. As per me, it's actually bigger than Vegas. They themselves have a game recognition standard. If you were to go to Macau and say, hey, recognize rummy, they take about 2 years. You'll have to actually file all the papers. You'll have to actually give them all the standards in which you are actually operating. And there's a way in which a game is regulated. A regulated environment itself has a game regulation standard. So why can't a country like India have all of this? And if you see 90 or 70% of the whole casino industry's backend is actually held by our IT sector. So it's no new that sector is feeding IT in a significant manner.
Yeah. Understood. Do you have the same views, Pragni? Do you also think it's probably too early, but at the end of the day, the government should regulate it instead of the self-regulatory mechanisms?
I don't think it's too early. I think it's time to have some sort of regulation because there's already so much uncertainty and companies are losing money. And lawyers are making money, but that's not the goal, right? The goal is for the industry to develop. And so I feel like there should be standards put in place, whether it's by a government regulatory body, by the government in terms of a model code, by a self-regulatory body. I think the fastest way to do it is through a self-regulatory body because it'll just be but working with the government because there has to be some sort of recognition. Now, for example, if you see today, ASCII is a self-regulatory body, but their decisions and their viewpoints and regulations are quoted in court judgments. It's assimilated so beautifully that while it's the industry and the industry norms and the players, they've managed to be responsible enough for it to be considered akin to a law, right? It's not the law today. And if this happens in the gaming space as well, it may be faster. I mean, I know right now there's fragmentation of different bodies. Maybe everybody comes together and even the 95 smaller players should come together with the 5 bigger players, and everybody should unite and do this as one cohesive effort, because as I said, right now the courts are taking the view that and the general consensus is games of skills are allowed. So companies should make the most of it while the environment is like that. If you see even the cricketers and all who were endorsing the in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, there were cases, even those were dismissed. You see, so while the courts are aligned with the industry interest is something, it should be done sooner rather than later because things can change overnight.
Understood. And I'm going to ask just the same question that I was asking Parikshit. If you were to advise the gaming sector to build trust with the government and with their users, whether it's over the next few months, years, or decades, like Parikshit said, what would be the steps you would recommend?
So there's nothing new that I would actually do. I do the same thing again and again. Take our games of skill argument to them, help them understand. Nobody actually knows. I wouldn't say nobody. Majority of people in the government may not know how this operates. The stand at which we are, they are actually not aware of that, is my view. Whereas there's a certain segment which doesn't understand and may not actually need to understand also. There's a certain segment which needs to understand and have a different understanding. So it takes time. So we are going. We're going to states, we're going to center, wherever possible, we are doing our representations. And representations do take time unless and until there is a burning need to actually solve some problem. That sector will actually keep it on hold because they have other things to handle at the moment. So if you look at it from my point of view, first of all, there is no representative from gaming point of view in either the upper house or lower house when it comes to politics. So there should be a representative, like film industry has a representative. Similarly, every sector has one or the other person representing them in the houses.
Is this the discretionary quota that the president has to nominate members? Are you referring to that?
I think I'm not actually asking them to do anything. It's my personal view that, see, if a voice has to be heard, whose voice do you listen to? If there are 5 SROs, who will you actually talk to and understand? First is have a person.
That's the problem the industry is created for itself, right? That's not a problem that the government has set upon you. If the industry were to come together and form one regulator like the ASCII has in advertising, then the government would talk to them.
See, I've heard ASCII. I don't know if ASCII is regulated, but if
It's
some
a
is
self-regulatory body, but that's the only body in the advertising space.
correct. So if government actually comes up and says, I want to regulate AIGF, I want to regulate IAMAI, why not? Do we actually say no to anyone? The SRO itself will actually say, I am pleased to accept your recognition, and everybody will come under that. So for government to understand that and come and say, hey, Vishwam, I'm actually doing this for you, there should be somebody and going and telling them that, hey, we have this organization, please recognize. That's what was happening with FIFS going to Niti Aayog and presenting everything. But obviously, we have our own challenges in the industry by, say, a certain rule code actually comes for fantasy sports and it is not applicable for rummy or poker or any other game. It may not be correct. So, having a representative on the political side is much needed. If we have one representative from the bureaucratic side to understand what we need, that will be much needed. Recognition of SRO from the governments will actually solve many problems. Once you have a recognition, all the people will come under that. And then you can actually enhance the self-regulation code by releasing a government code. And government code should have advertising guidelines, payment guidelines, grievance redressal, whatever you want to have, you have it. And there will be companies which are actually following it, and there are companies which are not following it. The non-following ones will be penalized, and that's how the trust is built over years of time, is my view.
Thank you. That's quite helpful. I'm going to ask you the same question, Pragni.
So I think I've answered it, right, already.
Do you want to give like a 2-minute summary again?
I don't think ASCII is recognized officially by the government. It's just given that respect in the court. So that's one thing. But I mean, sure, if the government recognizes a body, that's great. I don't know if government recognizes self-regulatory bodies in that way, because even in intermediaries, they have 3, 4, even in, so it may not actually happen that the government recognizes these bodies officially, but they can work together and develop an environment of trust where the government actually has some faith that if they step back and they don't need to take this overtly paternalistic attitude, the gaming sector will develop responsibly, bearing everybody's interests at, the consumers and players, as well as the gaming industry and, the employment created by that, the employees of the industry. It'll have a positive impact overall if something like that happens.
Just on the SRO's point, I think the Ministry of Consumer Affairs recognizes ASCII, and the Ministry of Information Broadcasting has started recognizing self-regulatory bodies under the IT Act and the Cable TV Network Act. But that's obviously the recognition is under a statute. So there is a legislative statute under which the government will recognize.
So it's not that they won't recognize. I'm not talking. So the self-regulatory bodies are recognized. What we're talking about is one step further, right? Like that they have their regulations. And so today, as a grievance redressal system, I'll be recognized, right? But I'm talking about one step further where the standards of gaming also could be put forth by those things may not be recognized by the government, right? That's not the role of a self-regulatory body in the strict sense of the word. But today, if AIGF has these standards and their members adopt it, and there's an element of trust between the government and AI and a self-regulatory body and an industry, and they see that it's growing responsibly, then you could grow faster by having some sort of a uniformity, which is what everybody wants, right? You want black and white, whether it's through a self-regulatory organization, industry standards, or through the law. So today, if you can do it through the self-regulatory organization, where under the confines of the current law, right? Because you can't, so games of skill. So state-wise, you have uniformity on all these formats. That now, for example, poker to Karnataka and some other court said yes. Right now, it's pending in Gujarat, and it's not. So all these gaming companies have to geotag, keep a track of the various jurisdictions. So that uniformity, if you can get under the confines of the test, which has already been set by the Supreme Court, I think that would be a great starting point.
Right. Okay. And Parikshit, I know you've dealt with other jurisdictions as well, especially in the West. How does it presently work if I'm a gaming company in the US or the UK and people in India are playing the game, but I have no connection to India? Is that fine? Are there any laws which restrict international gaming companies from operating in India?
So yeah, if you look at it from a UK point of view, UKGC has clear standard guidelines on how to operate, where to operate, how to actually promote bonus. They even actually go look at your terms and conditions of the bonus. So, and also they make sure that all your advertisements, everything, are actually as per the standard. So those companies have specific rules specific to jurisdictions. Beyond the jurisdictions, you're not operating under that license. If you're seeing some other companies operating in India, they're actually using various other licenses apart from the regular ones to operate in the gray markets. So if you look at US standard, US also will have the same standard. If you look at UK, they will have a UKGC standard. And you can't take players outside of the jurisdiction. So if the jurisdiction is for UK and Europe, you can only accept players under that jurisdiction only, under that license.
Okay.
That's another interesting point, because licenses also have different state-wise. They have different requirements and different applications. So even to foster growth and certainty, even standardization of licenses should be something that should be considered.
So how does it work presently in India? I mean, is there like a state license that states give out?
So some of the states have it. I think Nagaland, Meghalaya, Sikkim, like 3-4 of them, not all of them. But the thing is, all their applications and processes are different. Now, I think Meghalaya and Sikkim also say that the servers have to be within the state so they can control it, right? If they want to take down something, if they want to take action, they want to have access to it. So those two states also say the servers should be within the state. It's not within the country, right? Because of the state system. So all these things would have to be considered when you're streamlining stuff, not only the formats of the games and the skills, but what are the licensing criteria? Should that be standardized? Do you get a license to operate, and then you're like legal, like for example, if you're setting up a company and you get a shops and establishments registration, you can start work. Do you get the same kind of license for a particular format, and then nobody can come and say that you're not compliant with the laws. So all those things should also be considered.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I'm going to just move on to the last segment, which is just generally what is the future looking for the online gaming sector. And obviously, this doesn't have to be limited to regulation or the laws. But I'm going to come to you, Pragni, first, because you mentioned that it's growing very quickly, and you think it's actually bigger than the real estate market in India, or it's going to be someday.
I don't have the numbers in my head, so
no, not the numbers.
I don't know how big it will be.
But what is your take generally on the future of, say, online gaming, fantasy sports, esports, game of skill in India, both from a commercial perspective without the numbers and also from a regulatory perspective?
The future is, if the regulations foster growth, then it'll grow, right? People are right now not, and the growth is also stunted, and then they have all these costs with, like for example, what happened in Karnataka with Dream 11, then they have to all those hidden costs also come in. So if there's certainty, sure, the sector will grow. It's going to be very exciting actually now with NFTs and crypto, this is all coming also as part of gaming. Crypto is not regulated in India. NFTs are not regulated. NFTs are going to become huge in gaming. It's already, you can, in gaming, you have NFTs for clothes and houses and making rooms in games. And honestly, I'm not really a gamer, so I haven't played a game, so I don't know the full semantics. But NFTs can be used even for prizes or even to give you certificates to get to the next level. So I mean, and it's changing every day, right? Like, so technology is really developing, and if the laws can be streamlined to foster growth, the sky is the ceiling for the industry.
And same question to you, Parikshit.
So can you repeat that question again? I'll put
So
it in a
what
different context.
of the game of skill, online gaming, esports, fantasy sports in India, both from a commercial lens, but also from a regulatory lens?
See, commercial lens is basically we're growing 30% year on year. That was previously shown with all the numbers that we are actually posting today. I think continuously we will grow in the same pattern, and this should be supported by telecom. If telecom is growing, we will also grow because mobile first is the approach that all the gaming companies are actually taking. So if the mobile users are about 450 million or 550 million internet users, obviously gaming will also grow in a certain manner for us. That's the commercial point of view. Having said that, if you look at from a taxation point of view, ideally there needs to be some clarity uh, that will actually come out in couple of months on the GST format. Right now, we are paying 18%, and some courts actually where it is actually for held. They want us to pay X number on either bet or the platform fee. If that is clear, then gaming companies will also go all in. And if you compare ride hailing with us, when they came in, and Ola, Uber were never regulated. And once all the people started using it and drivers actually start getting employment, they were forced to come out with a regulation. And obviously, there is an RTA Act for it and all that. And similarly, when we have 80% of our nation using mobile phones and 30% of those mobile phone users are actually playing a game, government is forced to regulate because they cannot control it anymore. So I wish that we grow further and further, and government actually listens to our plea and regulates everything crystal clear.
Thank you, Parikshit. Thank you, Pragni. I don't have any further questions. If there's anybody from the audience who has any questions or you want to share any comments, now may be a good time. Otherwise, we'll just wrap up the session. No, okay. Thank you so much, Pragni. Thank you so much, Parikshit. I'll just request Chaitanya from CLA and CII to close the webinar now.
Thank you, sir. So participants, this brings us to the end of today's session. On behalf of Team Corporate Law Advisor and CII, I would like to extend a special thanks to our panelists, Pragni ma'am, Parikshit sir, and Vishwam sir, for taking time out of their busy schedule and discussing this topic, which will soon be a hot topic in great detail. So see you all in the next session with other important updates and discussion on some other important topics. Till then, goodbye, take care, stay home and stay safe.
See you
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.